Friday, May 20th, 2015. It's about 12:31 a.m., so pretty early. So Dad had a fall. That's Dad. Dad had a fall. Okay, I'm going to try to keep the timeline as straight as I can. This is Friday. We have to go back 1 week before, the Tuesday before last. That night, on the Wednesday morning, I think that's what it was. About 2 in the morning, I was in bed. I was asleep, or pretty close to asleep. I don't remember which. All I remember is crash, crash, crash. And I think I heard Dad yell, although I'm not sure that he yelled. The crash itself might have woke me up. I jumped out of bed and ran into Dad's bedroom where he had fallen. He couldn't get up. He seemed to be in a lot of pain. He laid down he got down on his stomach. He has no breastbone, just a strip of bone up here, and the ribs have been cut away based upon the operation he had after he got the infection in 2000. After open heart surgery, he got a virus or bacteria, probably a bacteria called ORSA. At least they called it ORSA at the time, and it was a hospital kind of infection. And he had to remove his breastbone, and he went into a coma for several months, beginning in October of 2000, and then he came out of it in early January. So he missed the election, and he's responsible because he didn't vote for George Bush. Blame him. So at least that's what I told Dad. One of the first signs I had that Dad was alive and was going to make it, he was at that point nodding his head yes and no for yes and no. It's a binary communication mode. I was talking to him, and he was giving me answers yes and no about where he was. Do you understand what was going on? He was going yes, no, yes, no. And I said, did you know that, or said that, by the way, George Bush is now president. He seemed to go. It was like in the moment, he forgot that he was nearly paralyzed with a tube in his throat, and he couldn't speak and couldn't move. So Dad's been pretty sick before. Took him to the emergency room. Actually, I had to call paramedics because he rolled onto his belly, and he started getting slower and slower because without the rib cage, I think he was compressing his heart and his lungs. So I pushed him over onto his side. I had a hard time getting him to put his oxygen on because he seems to think oxygen is optional. It's like, Dad, put your oxygen on. No, let me get up first. Dad, you need the oxygen if you're going to get up. No. And so, he's very stubborn. So I got him on his side. I called 911. I got some paramedics. They lifted him up. And Dad was pretty woozy and pretty out of it. At that point, he really wasn't showing much sign of great pain yet. Probably shock. Or maybe things just hadn't, how sometimes you hurt yourself, but it's like a day later when you go, ow, I must have stubbed my toe harder than I thought yesterday. So he went to the emergency room that night. It was like 2:30 a.m. Wednesday before last, and this is the 20th of March 2015, so do the calculations as to what date that was. Several days went by. Dad was getting increasingly painful. Actually, for a couple of days he seemed to get better. Lesser and lesser pain until Saturday. Saturday seemed like he was almost on his way to recovery. But then that night he went to bed, and I guess laying on his side aggravated his wound. He turned out he had a broken rib. And the emergency room should probably not have sent him home. They should have admitted him. but that's a topic for a different discussion. So, Dad, that evening he got worse and worse, went into the early morning, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'll take you tomorrow. And, I asked him, could you get to the car now? And he didn't seem to think he'd be able to get to the car right then. So eventually I decided, no, I'm not going to let this go on till the morning, because even if he made it to the morning, I don't know that he would have died in the night, but he was hurting really bad. So I called the paramedics. They came and took Dad out in an ambulance. He, probably a good thing, because apparently his blood pressure had soared to 200 over some other large number. And here comes the kitty. And so, and there goes the kitty. Meow, come on. I'm trying to figure out how to get up here. Here he comes. Yes, we have a little kittervention. Anyway, I shall continue. Oh, cat butt. Okay, that's over with. The paramedics said that I made the right call, and that it was a good thing, because they took 2 of them to get him out of the house and on a gurney and down the. This is really when the front porch paid off. I had it turned into a ramp several years ago after his last time he got hauled away in an ambulance from here. So it made it a lot easier, because they just rolled him down the ramp instead of having to go down the stairs and so on, which aren't stairs anymore. But I digress. So I followed. I went about 45 minutes later, because I just needed a few minutes to decompress. And I thought I kind of waited too long, but it turned out I probably could have waited another half hour, because, they hadn't even gotten to him. They just put him in a room, and, nobody was. And he was in a lot of pain. They ended up admitting him. I came home and got a few hours sleep, because I hadn't been sleeping for several days, because I needed to be near him when he walked, because if he fell, I needed to be near him to keep him from falling, or worst case scenario, pick him up if he did. So So they admitted him. They told me that, about broken rib. They said he had that blood pressure, and they gave him morphine. And he had a CAT scan, both of his body and his abdomen. And he was there for several days. He was there until, let's see, this is Friday, so I guess Wednesday afternoon they sent him home. They said he had a pneumonia, but they kept, as far as they've told me, he doesn't seem to have any problems that they can detect. Of course, I wonder if we were talking about Bill Gates instead of Jimmy Green, what tests would they be doing? What would they, he seems confused. He's been nauseated. That was another thing. After the even after beginning with the fall, he had really bad nausea. Yeah, he had really bad nausea, and that's just been continuing. So he got morphine. They gave him antibiotics for the pneumonia, which turned out to be a MRSA. Is somewhat immune, but not completely immune to and modern antibiotics. Yes, Darwin was right. Evolution happens. And MRSA is proof of evolution on the micro level. and probably the macro, but that's a different story for another video. So Dad got transferred to a place called the Ridge, a rehabilitation facility, and they sent him there yesterday afternoon. He was really depressed yesterday. In fact, he said yesterday that he wanted to come home because he wanted to die in his own bed. He said, "I'm just like your mother like that. I want to die at my own home." And I have been talking to all his doctors, all his therapists, and I understand he's 87. But they don't find anything severely wrong. His kidney function is actually better now than it was several months ago. I understand why he could be depressed because of, he's 87 and weak and all that. Part of it, I think, is because he hasn't been exercising as much as he should. I'm continually telling him, "Dad, let's go for a walk." "I don't want to." So, he probably goes a week or two between walks or longer. And he gets very mean and abusive and angry when if I do manage to convince him to go out to the car, he's like really angry and abusive and verbally nasty to me. On the way trip over, on the way trip back, picking any excuse to start an argument, constantly insulting me. So sometimes I think I should really just put up with it and just say, "Okay, you don't mean it. You're like a barking dog. You don't really mean it." Except I know he kind of means it. And so I, don't put up with it as much. Every so often I'll put up with it to get him out of the house because it's been a week or two since he last walked. And I'll take him out somewhere to go walk, like, Northridge Mall or the shopping, or even just the shopping center. He can go walk through the shopping center if you Northridge, or through Walmart or someplace like that, or Safeway, just to get a little walking. And it usually helps him a lot. I know how it is when you go a period of time, days or weeks or sometimes months, when you don't do a lot of exercise, and then you start up exercising again. The first few days and weeks are agony. But then you reach a point where your body takes over and, you've built up the strength again to move. And, Dad is losing things. He is losing his ability. And one of these days, he will die. But it doesn't seem like this is the time, as far as I can tell. Now, there may be something wrong that they haven't detected. He's been kind of confused. I think the nausea may be what I call a micro concussion. In other words, whatever he banged his head, it's not bad enough. It was not a serious enough injury to be noticeable on a CT scan. I don't know how sensitive a CT scan is, but I can't imagine one in a hospital like Salinas would be that sensitive to be able to detect an impact. You've caused enough damage in the head that it can't be detected, but it is damage that is affecting something like nausea. Now, I think that if I'm correct in my hypothesis, I predict that means that little damage is healable or recoverable. In other words, I doubt Dad's brains have been totally scrambled forever. It may be a net downturn just because of his age. And maybe his age, that kind of a hit when he fell on his brain, maybe for me or for someone who's 19, it's like, "Oh, I'm dizzy. Okay, I'm better. Let's keep going." In him, it's going to be a little more serious. But I think it's ultimately recoverable. So the ultimate goal is to get him to be able to come home. And that's going to depend, I think, on whether or not Dad ever gets to be strong enough to come home. I'm optimistic, but there are several factors. He may never be strong enough to be left alone again. Which means that he'll always have to have somebody nearby to either help him or to pick him up if he falls, presumably to help him. And I can't do that. So we might have to do something about that in terms of Dad may have to live somewhere where there's somebody around him. And I don't mean a nursing home. And the options for that, I don't really want to... Well, those are things I should probably think about. I have options I don't want to discuss on this video right now. But I think Dad may have reached the point where he's can't be left alone, and it's probably foreseeable the time will come, perhaps not in the too distant future, where he's wheelchair bound, where he can't stand up on his own or can't walk anymore. He might be able to stand up, he might be able to walk a few steps with help, but he may become wheelchair bound before much longer. I hope that's not the case. I think it's plausible that he might improve to the point where getting around with a walker will be safe again. There's a lot of things I need to think about the future for Dad, for me. Transition is coming, for both of us. And I haven't even begun to talk about the implications of all this for my life. But I've been thinking about them. And I'll talk about that in some other video. That's all for now.